Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the Westbury Public Library, Westbury, New York. It is the 9th of August, 2006, approximately 1:15 p.m. Interviewers are Mike Russ and Dwayne Clark. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
James Gerard Hawks. I was born April 6th, 1926 in the Brooklyn Hospital.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I had 8 years of grammar school, 3 years of high school.
Okay. Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I did. I was in a drugstore right across the street from the high school eating lunch.
Mm-hmm.
And we heard FDR's speech on the radio.
Okay, what was your reaction when you heard about this?
Shock, for one,
Mm-hmm.
and surprised, to say the least. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did you know where Pearl Harbor was?
I had an idea.
Okay. All right. Did you enlist or were you drafted?
I was drafted. I tried to enlist in the Marines when I was on my 17th birthday. My father wouldn't hear of it. He ripped the application up. And I went down and enlisted in the Navy just prior to going into the service with 2 other friends. And I was shocked that I couldn't pass the eye test. Mm-hmm. I could read everything except the line they required for enlisting. So they both went in, and I had to wait another month or so. Mm-hmm. I went down a second time to re-enlist, and I went through the same physical, 3 hours or so. And meanwhile, those 2 friends of mine were gone. So I said to the master in arms at the table when I got all through, and I said to him, look, I'm going to be 18 in another month. I don't want to have to go in the Army. I'd rather go in the Navy or the Marines. So he said, I don't know what to tell you. He says, the only thing I can say is when you turn 18, volunteer for immediate induction. And it might be your credit, you know. Mm-hmm. So I went to the draft board, April 6th. I said to him, I want my application right away. I want to fill it out. I want to bring it back to you this afternoon. I want immediate induction. The guy looked at me like I was nuts. He said, okay, if that's what you want. So it worked. I went to my physical about 3 weeks later. Went through the same physical for the 3rd time. Passed it with no problem. I went to the desk again. He says, you're in.
Now, why did you decide on the Marines at first?
Well, it's a bit of a story here. When I was a kid, about 12 years old, prior to the war, there was a young fellow on our block who was an orphan. He lived with his married sister who really couldn't afford to keep him on. Mm-hmm. And when he turned 17, just to have a life of his own, he joined the Marine Corps. And when he would come home on leave, we'd be kids would be playing stickball on the street, mm-hmm. and Charlie would be walking down the block in his dress blue with a white hat, you know, and he'd whistle to us, and we'd all run over to him to look at his medals and stuff like that. And he became my hero. Mm-hmm. Plus the fact that he used to take about 6 or 7 kids right to the drugstore and buy them all ice cream sodas. I thought, geez, when I grow up, I want to be like this guy. He's what I want to be. Well, from that point on, right up until the war, that's all I could think of was going after the Marines. Mm-hmm. But my father says, no way. We had lost a sister. I had lost a sister just before the war started. Mm-hmm. My parents had 4 children altogether. 1 died at 9 before I was born. My older brother, 9 years older than me, had been in the Army for 4 years prior to the war down in Hawaii. Came out. When the war started, he went right back in the same day. War was declared around 1 o'clock, 1:30. He was sworn into the Army at 3 o'clock that day. So that left just me, the sole member of the family home. And my father was at the controlling. He says, you'll do what I say. I'm not going to lose another child, you know. Mm-hmm. Needless to say, he would not let me go in the Marines. Mm-hmm. So that's why I switched my thoughts to the Navy.
Mm-hmm. Why did you pick the Navy?
I didn't want to go in the Army because my brother was in the Army.
Okay. Now, did he survive the war? Or?
Oh, he did. He just died, about 89 years old, just this past February. Mm-hmm. We were down in Florida, and we were there for the whole thing.
Where did he fight? In the Pacific or?
He was initially before the war. He put 4 years in Panama on the Coast Artillery. Mm-hmm. After the war, because of his previous experience, he was in training new recruits coming in, mm-hmm. and he did that for about 2 years. He tried to get into the Air Corps, he tried to transfer into the infantry, mm-hmm. but he was still important to the Army because of his experience, mm-hmm. and he could fire any weapon that they had at the time mm-hmm. and get expert on it, you know. So he did a lot of his time doing that, and then he became the they sent him to Puerto Rico, and he did everything to get out of Puerto Rico, to go somewhere, and he became the provost marshal of Puerto Rico, and he was there until he retired, until he was discharged from the army. So he really didn't see action in World War II, but he was in it for 5 years.
Okay.
Was he enlisted or?
He enlisted both times. Oh yeah. But when the war started, most of the men who went in were all draftees, and they had no experience, so they needed experienced men, and unfortunately he was in that category, and he was that way for 5 years. I went in, and within 6 months I was in the Pacific.
Now,
That's how things are.
Yes.
You don't have any control over it. When you're in the service, you do what you're told, and that's the end of it.
Now, where did you go for your basic?
Sampson, New York.
Sampson, okay. What was it like at Sampson?
It was a typical naval training base. There was a lot of discipline, extreme discipline. You had a march, you did nothing but march around and study aircraft identification, ship identification, silhouettes of the ships flashed on the wall, you know. Really basic naval training. And we were brainwashed to the degree that you had us talk in naval terms constantly. The floor was the deck, the walls were the bulkhead. I mean, it's drilled into it, you know. And God forbid you say the floor, you get 2 hours extra duty just for not saying the bulkhead. So it was very strict in those senses, but I thought it was great. I mean, I really enjoyed it, you know. And I had taken several aptitude tests prior, I would say 12 weeks. So during that time, you get different aptitude tests that you have to take. So then they base what school to send you to on the results of all your tests. So when you're there about halfway through the 12 weeks, you go before an interviewing officer, and he discusses with you what they think you would be good at. Well, I had worked for about 9 months as an apprentice in the sheet metal business, just prior to going into the Navy. That's why I only had 3 years in high school. During the war, a lot of the men who were in the businesses and as apprentices were all drafted. So my whole family of sheet metal workers, and that summer when I was off from school, my father says to me, "Would you like to work for the summer as a sheet metal apprentice?" I said, "Sure." You know. So when September rolled around, it was time to go back to school. I was making money like I never really knew before. So I said to my father, "I think I'd rather stay here until I'm old enough to go into the service." You know, so that was a big argument in my house also, the fact that I was going to lose a year of high school. But I went out. So that 9 months set me up to go to aviation metalsmith school, which was exactly what I wanted. I wanted to be on an aircraft carrier. As long as I was in the Navy, I wanted something like that. So according to this interviewing officer, I had it made. I mean, I'd be right into aviation metalsmith school. But lo and behold, like everything else in the service, you do what you're told. Well, as it turned out, when the CBs were first opened and started, which was in 1942, everyone coming in were coming in from the field of construction. Everyone was given guaranteed, and they were first class petty officer, third class, second class, and chief. That's how they came in to the CBs. And it was great. It went along fine, except the Navy reached the point where they had all these construction men, all with the experience, but they had no Indians. They had no one to do what these guys wanted them to do. So they decided, well, we'll just draft a group. So they put 1,000 names on the list from all the companies in Sampson that were graduating from boot camp that week or that month. And they put them in this draft. And then after about 5 days of waiting to be called on my first draft, I had either aviation metalsmith school as first choice or radio school second choice, and your third choice was OEC duty. So I went through the 3 different things, and I wasn't on any one of those drafts either. But all of a sudden, lo and behold, they started calling out 1,000 names. So when they were all done, they said, these names that were just called, you have 1 hour to get your gear, fall out on the railroad siding, and be ready to move. Not knowing, not telling us what draft, where we were going, what it was all about, but that was it. And I'm one of those 1,000. So an hour later, we're on the railroad siding, we had these, what they call, I can't think of the name of it offhand, but they were called wacky cars or something. It's in here someplace. Well, they're from the old car, railroad cars, from the year of the flood. So we boarded this train and we rode for about 10 hours. We didn't know where we were going. Next day we wake up and we're pulling into another railroad siding. All we see is Quonset huts painted in a camouflage color, and a lot of men walking around with olive-drab uniforms, the like of which we've never seen. They all had little pea caps. Someone said it must be an Italian prisoner of war camp or something. So anyway, they get us off the train, they line us up again, and we hear a group coming towards us in the cadence, marching, you know. So again, all these men in green, dark green that we never, I mean, we were used to white, you know, the tan leggings from boot camp and the white suits, because it was in the summertime. And these guys looked nothing like that. Behind them was a contingent of Marines walking along, coming right towards us, you know. So we're lined up wondering, where are we, what are we going to do? So the guy in charge of the first group of these Marine green uniforms says, all right, you men, we know where you're from. We know what you've done for the last 12 weeks. Forget it all. Anything you were taught in that other place, take it right out of your mind, because we don't talk the way they talk. We don't do anything the way that. He says, that was the Navy. He says, you are now in the construction battalion. So we looked at the construction battalion, what the deuce is that? I mean, we actually didn't know. That's how young this whole thing was, you know. So he gives us a spiel of about 10 minutes as to what we're going to do from here on in. Then the Marine sergeant comes up and he says, all right, you heard from the Master Chief there. He says, now we're going to tell you what we're going to do with you. He says, we're going to teach you not how to use a wooden dummy rifle, but we're going to teach you how to use an M1 rifle. We're going to take you to the firing range. We're going to teach you how to shoot it. We're going to teach you how to throw hand grenades. We're going to teach you everything that they didn't teach you, but that you're going to need them now. And it was like a whole change of life. All of a sudden, we went from one thing to another, and they did grew us for another 12 weeks. We went to all kinds of classes on construction, different things that you had to know about carpentry, different things you had to know about plumbing, about cement work, and then the Marines took over. We had judo classes, we had gunnery classes on the M1 rifle, how to clean it, how to take it apart in the dark. Everything that you would have in the Army, infantry, we were now in the Navy, but suddenly we were in like a different branch of the service altogether. So we learned to love it though. It was fantastic. It was what I wanted to do originally when I wanted to go into the Marines. This was what I was getting now in the Seabees. I loved it. I really did. So our job was to go to Guam. Guam was going to be built up as a supply depot for the invasion of Japan. So we spent a year unloading truck after truck after truck of everything imaginable, from timbers to office equipment to machine guns to trucks to jeeps. And we were getting Guam as the floating invasion point of Japan. Everything you can imagine for an invasion, we were unloading and storing there, with the fact that it was when it was ready for the invasion, which of course never took place, but they had them on, we would then go forward and unload all the stuff on the beach and then be right in there with it, you know. All of which never.
Now, how did you get out to Guam?
We were under convoy going out. We were on an Army troop ship going out, the USS General Howie Taylor. It took us 43 days to get from Port Hueneme, California, we went first to Hawaii. We spent a week in Pearl Harbor at Hawaii, and waiting for other ships to meet us for this convoy. We left California with 3 ships as far as Pearl Harbor. When we left Pearl Harbor, we had about 15 ships, 2 destroyer escorts, and we started out. And it was a zigzag course. For a couple hours, they would change course. And we hit the Marshall Islands, and we stayed there for about another week. And every morning you'd wake up, there'd be a couple more ships at anchor where you were, So they were in massing for a couple of invasions, Okinawa, Iwo Jima. They were building them up at that point. And every morning you'd wake up, there'd be maybe 10 more ships at anchor in the Marshall Island area where we rendezvoused. So it was interesting, You never knew what was happening or where you were going or what was going on. I mean, it was all secretive, of course. Lots of rumors were flying around the ship that we were on as what we're going to be. There was men making up stories, what they thought it might be, So all of a sudden, we wake up one morning and we're all moving. And this is a huge convoy now. And again, it took us 43 days to reach Guam at that pace. There was one point where we were at general quarters for about 18 hours because they had sighted one submarine off in the distance, and it wouldn't answer to the signaling that they were getting. And then they also disappeared, but they thought it was still down there somewhere. So we were at general quarters on all the ships, I guess, for 18 hours, and then it was clear. It did say an oil slick on the water, which is the trick that the subbers do a lot, but that really didn't mean anything, so they felt well, they were safe and everything took off. But that was the closest I ever came to that kind of a deal, you know. But then we continued on. Eventually, as big as the convoy built up, you'd wake up some mornings and you'd be off on a different range and you'd have less ships. So they were going to various islands that we weren't going to. But we ended up on Guam. And of course we landed on LCBIs and stuff like that. Little landing craft to take us ashore, you know. Because the ships couldn't pull into any dock area. There wasn't any, you know. So it was interesting. And then we started then working our tails off. 12-hour shifts around the clock for one solid year. We didn't stop working.
Did you have any time off or free time?
For the first 8 months we had no time off. Not a time off at all. You worked from 7 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning. The other gang worked from 7 in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. There was no time off at all. After that, things reached the point where we were taking time off. We were taking like every other week. You would get a couple of nights of movies, which was a rarity at that point. We had forgotten what movies were like. So, but then they started setting up a movie screen and giving you movies at night, you know, just as a break. In the daytime, guys that were working days, of course, they would come at some point during that night, see the movie also, and then you go back, you know. But I worked nights, so it was from 7 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning. And we were working constantly. I mean, it was truck after truck pulling in with supplies from the harbor area. And sometimes you'd have to work down at the harbor in landing craft as the stuff would come off the ships and bring, you know, in their booms and stuff like that, bring it into the shore. But it was everything you can imagine. We could have built Nassau County with the supplies laying in Guam to be sent to Japan. We had 12 by 12 timbers, 20 to 30 foot long. What they were going to do with them, I don't know. But we had them stacked up like you wouldn't believe. We had a couple of hundred Army trucks, a couple of hundred Jeeps. We had all kinds of boxes that we couldn't open. God knows what was in them, but they were there, stored up. You know. It was a big planning thing for something that never happened. Millions and millions of dollars were spent on what was there, and we just left it there. Whatever happened to it, I don't know.
Now, were you assigned to a particular CB unit?
144th CB Battalion, ABCD. That was another initial attack on it. It was Advanced Base Construction Depot. Well, that was it as far as supplies. That was the last point. From the States, anything that was going to go to the invasion of Japan was on Guam. That was going to be the stepping stone. So the full title was 144th NBC ABCD. No, 144th NCB, ABCD after that in parentheses. And that was for the Advanced Base Construction Depot. We first thought it was Advanced Base Combat Division. That was the rumor going around, but that wasn't so. That was somebody made that up, you know, to scare everybody. But it was construction depot.
Now, what about tropical diseases like malaria or dengue fever or anything like that?
A lot of men, I still have it, fungus on your feet from the dampness and whatnot. My one big toe on my left foot, that's been that way since I got into the service. But malaria wasn't that big, because we had all kinds of pills and things to take down there. You know, but posts with boxes of salt pills on them and whatever, you know. So we never had any sign of malaria out there, but the dampness from the just the humidity and everything down there was a lot of fungus. But that was all I had, was just on my one big toe.
Now, what were your particular assignments?
My assignment was working as a rigger. We had teams of 5. We had a crane operator and 4 riggers. 2 riggers that worked at whatever's on the truck to hook up the stuff. 2 riggers that work on the ground. And the crane operator actually would break in all of his 4 riggers to operate the crane so that he could get a break some nights and just hop on like a truck. Now, it gets monotonous doing the same thing for 12 hours, you know. So initially, it was that 5-man gang doing the rigging and the operator doing the operating. But after a while, we got to know the feel of everything, and the operators took each one of us and broke us into operating the crane. So we operated all types of cranes, link belt, the crawler type of cranes, the cranes that were mobile, truck cranes. They had all kinds that we used for our own work. You know.
How would you rate your equipment?
I beg your pardon?
How would you rate the equipment that you had? Was it?
Or what we were driving and
Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
fine. It was very good. It was funny. The first, I guess the second night there, I hadn't driven a car before I left the States. I didn't have any license, never had any chance to drive. My father had a car, but I wasn't allowed to touch it. So we were working along, and the guy that we had was like another man. When we put in small boxes, they would come in on wooden pallets, and we had a forklift driver. So the forklift guy was working like crazy all night long, and suddenly he got something wrong. So the crane operator yells at me, "Hey Hawks, get in that forklift and start picking up these boxes." I says, "I don't know how to drive." He says, "Well, but by 7 o'clock in the morning, you'll be an expert driver. Get on that forklift, I'll tell you what to do." So that night, I learned how to drive. I put the forks in and had it tilted up to back it out, you know, and I didn't know what I was even doing. In fact, one time I started backing out and I almost ran into the crane from backing out, you know. He said, "God damn it, wait, listen to what I tell you to do," and all this. It was funny, but I mean, this is how you learn it as you went along, you know. He said, "By the time you're out of here, so you'll be driving tractor trailers." And I did.
Now, what were living conditions like? What did you live in, tents?
Tents initially, and then another group was breaking off from the unloading of trucks to start building the huts. So we had lived in Quonset huts for 3/4 of the time. But initially, to get started, we lived in a couple of tents. The living was good. The food was fair, I have to say that. And,
did you have sea rations, or did you have
a lot of that, sea rations too. But,
cooks there? Or,
we had cooks. Oh yeah. What was comical, not comical, but what we had to live with is that we had no fresh water. They hadn't any water regulated, you know, any way of doing it. So there would be a tank truck would come around after the end of each 7, 12-hour shift. So we would get off at 7 in the morning, and about maybe 9 o'clock, a small tank truck would pulled by a Jeep, and that would have fresh water in it. So all the men on the night gang that were waiting for this tank truck, we'd take our helmets over the tank truck, and we'd fill up our helmet. And meanwhile, we had a fire going. We'd take all the slots and crate wood and pallet wood that got broken, and we'd make a fire. So we put about 7 helmets of the cold water in the fire, and wait there till it heated up, and you take your underwear off, and you throw your underwear in. No, first you'd wash yourself with it first. And if you wanted to shave, you'd shave yourself with the warm water. When that was done, you took your underwear off and your sweatshirts or your pants, threw them in with some soap suds, and you were done boiled. About an hour later, you go over there, you take them out, wring them out, and hang them on a tree. You know. We did that for about, I would guess, 4 months after we got there. We had no running water to speak of. Unless you wanted to use salt water. A lot of guys would jump out in the ocean and wash themselves with saltwater soap, but I didn't like that. You never felt like you were clean to start with, you know. Your clothes, they're like so stiff as boards after a while, you know. But that's how we managed, with the helmets full of water. And, you'd wash yourself first, then wash your clothes, you know, let them soak, and then dump the water out, and that was it. It's all part of your day. You know, these things sound ridiculous and serious, but they really weren't. I mean, you adjust to that. That's the way you lived, you know. And you'd be surprised how fast you adjust to something when you have to, you know.
Were there any USO shows at all there?
There would be occasionally, and we used to miss most of them because I was on the night gang. They only showed them at night, you know. So the day gang always got to see the shows, but the night gang was a little bit gypped in a sense. Sometimes they would put one on in the daytime, but usually they would be in an area one night and they'd be gone onto some other area of the island, you know. So when we were lucky, there'd be one in the daytime, so we'd get to see that. It worked out. You know. It was good. I really had no complaints about my entire time. It was hard work, and it was constant. But as I said, you just adjust to the environment, and you take each day as it comes, you know.
how were the relations between the men in your unit?
Very good, very good. We got along very good. We were not allowed to talk to the civilians down there. They were out of bounds. If you were caught, even walking over to one of their homes, and you would get extra duty like you wouldn't believe. There was a no-no. You didn't talk to the civilians. And but as far as morale, we had no problem. We really didn't. Had a good group of men. We all got along. And we were all basically the ones that were put into this thing like I was. We were all in the same area. The real men that were in first, they were in a different area. They had their own area. So that they didn't even mingle with us when we were off duty. You know, like the real construction men that were breaking us in, they were in one part of the camp and we were in another. So it was a good setup, you know.
What were your officers like?
They were very good. It was very good. There was only one officer that nobody liked, and he was a mean son of a gun, but we ignored him most of the time. As a matter of fact, he came over to our train one night. We played a little trick on him. He was one of these guys that loved to catch you doing something wrong, you know. Eventually, sometimes he would, you know. And our crane operator, he was like our boss, the guy that was the operator. So he says to look, he says, this guy will never catch us not doing anything. So he says, some night, I'm going to catch him. And he says, we're going to give him a little bit of what he gives everyone else, a bad time. So sure enough, we're working on it. We're there a couple of months. This guy pulled up, and he liked it. As he would be going around the area, because there was only lights where a crane was working, because it was dark at night. There was lights all around the whole storage area. But this guy would creep up in his Jeep and turn the lights off, and then just inch up slowly to where you were working so that you wouldn't see him. And he'd sit in his Jeep for maybe 10 minutes watching what was going on, if anyone was just not doing their best or doing what they could do, you know. And our chief his name was Lancy, Dick Lancy. No, Bob Lancy. He was aware of what this guy was doing, and it annoyed him to the nth degree. So one night, he pulls up where we are, and Lancy sees him. So he gives us all the signal, and he gets up there. He'll come into, they had each area, we were right by that tent. There was a tent with whatever the district we were in of the large storage base, had a tent where you could come in. There was always a guy in charge. He was in charge of that area, the lumber area, the box area. And the officer would eventually go into the tent and talk to this guy, see how everything was going, you know. So when he gets into the tent, the officer, and there's his Jeep sitting there. So Bob Yancey drops the hook down with the 2 slings on it, and he says to the riggers, hook that up. So the Jeeps are built with things on each corner so you could get it up, you know. We put the 2 sets of slings on the Jeep, and up the Jeep goes, up in the air. He swings the boom around and turns the boom light off. So the officer comes out of the tent after about 10 minutes, and he goes, where's my Jeep? Nancy says, I don't know, did you bring your Jeep up this far? I don't see any Jeep. And there's the thing hanging right above the guy's head. Nancy felt like dropping it right on him, but he didn't. I mean, he just kept it there, you know. Guy walks over around, he goes back into the tent. Tells the guy to get on the hand radio and call the next tent over and send a Jeep over for him, because his Jeep, something happened to it, you know. Guy pulls up at the other Jeep, and while the guy is in the tent, we lower the Jeep down onto the ground. The guy comes out, there's 2 Jeeps there. Where did this come from? No, so we made the guy feel like like a little idiot, you know. There was only one way of getting there, to get rid of the guy. Finally, I think maybe it sunk in, but I doubt it, you know. But I mean, these are the stupid things that went on, you know. And it was stupid, really. Now, what can you do? When you're in an environment like that, you sort of go with the flow. You know, you adjust the way life is, and you go along with it, you know. It was good. I loved every minute of it. I think I enjoyed being in the Seabees after I did it, more than had I stayed in the Navy part of it.
Okay. Were there any people that left an impression on you more than others?
Some did. Some were really a pain in the neck, you know, the men from Sampson. But most of them, I would say 95%, we all got along great. Really. Matter of fact, I continued sending Christmas cards back and forth to a lot of them after the war, you know, and little by little, some of them died. One of them just died this past year. But we did keep in touch, you know, for several years after we were both all out. It was nice.
Were there any unusual duties that you performed? recall.
No, not really. I can't say that we did. We never had any combat problems because although they say there were still about 1,000 Japs loose on Guam, and eventually they were, you know, little by little they captured a few, you know. But the Japs didn't want to start trouble because they were going to stay as free as long as they could, naturally, you know. A lot of the natives were hiding them. Some of the Japs that were on the island actually were like dating some of the women on the island, let's put it that way. And women would hide them, you know. Because they were there long before the Americans took it back over again, so they infiltrated the families. But there was there was one Marine that they found with his throat cut, but it was done very quietly. The guy that did it must have been an expert. I guess he was caught, you know, I mean, they swear it was a Jap that he must have come out at night to prowl around, and this poor guy was standing guard with me somewhere, and they found him about 2 hours after he was slashed, and he was gone. He was gone. It was about the size of it, you know. At night, you're always a little bit leery of that type of thing, but we never experienced any, you know. But there were supposedly about 1,000 Japs still on the island when we read it. We had a prisoner of war camp ourselves. I mean, we would take the Japanese prisoners and put them on work details, particularly in the day gang. They never had to work at night because they were afraid they'd run away again. But the day gang, some of them were assigned to take it going over to the stockade we had right in our base. And there'd be about, I think there was like 50 Japanese prisoners there. And they would take out maybe 15 or 20 and take them on over to the tire shop where they would repair flat tires and stuff like that. Or they'd go around picking up papers, you know, just to give them something to do and keep them busy. So it was, you know, that type of thing went on. But there was never any hand-to-hand combat with them or anything of that nature. I mean, they were too smart for that because they were living pretty good, the ones that were in the stockade. They were fed as well as we were, you know. And if they were out there roaming around, they may not have been fed as regularly as being in prison.
Now, you were in Guam when the victory in Europe was declared. Were there any celebrations?
It sure was. It sure was. Yeah. We had our own beer cooler. It was one of these walk-in coolers where we stored the beer. And being on the night gang, when we got the news, we heard the news about 3 o'clock in the morning. We all hopped on our trucks and went back to the base. And they tried to get the beer cooler open. There was a big padlock on it during the night. And so somebody took the boom, boom, boom. That was the end of the padlock, and the cooler was open, and we had a party. But no one said anything. It was one of those go ahead and do a thing, you know.
Do you recall hearing about the death of President Roosevelt and your reaction to that? Or?
Yes, we heard that. That was a very sad thing for us, you know, really. What can you do? It happens, you know.
How about the dropping the atomic bombs?
Well, we were glad. But, I mean, it was just a shock even that they did it, you know. I mean, we had never even heard of the atomic bomb prior to that, so to us it was something that was great because we knew that would be the end of this whole situation for us. We'd be going home. But to hear about all the people that were killed and whatnot, it was a little unsettling in that respect, you know.
Now, when did you eventually leave Guam?
Well, I come home in '46. I had to stay because they had a point system.
Yes.
You had to stay until you had the right amount of points to leave, you know. So I was there, I guess, after the final part of the war for maybe another 5 months before I was eligible to go home. And that was a pleasant surprise. Most of the guys from Guam or from the Pacific would go to the West Coast, and then they'd have to take trains or fly or whatnot, of course, to wherever they lived, you know. We got aboard the ship, the USS Wakefield, and it was it had been a pleasure boat prior to the war. It was a big ship, and because the war had ended already, that was going to be decommissioned as a troop ship. So unbeknownst to us when we got aboard it, we thought we were going to San Francisco or one of those places. And we're out to sea maybe about a week, and over the PA system announced this ship is en route to the eastern seaboard of the United States via the Panama Canal. I said, wow, this is a break for us. Because most of the people in my battalion were from the East Coast, you know. At least from the Mississippi East, they were, most of them. So we didn't know what city we were going to. They didn't tell you that until the very end. So, but going through the canal was an experience which I thought was interesting, you know. And then we get through the canal, and they had a big party at one of the docks on the Atlantic side. We were out off the ship and into this dock, and it was all fenced in. You couldn't get off the dock, but the Salvation Army were there and the Red Cross, giving out hot chocolate, all kinds of cakes, you know, and whatnot. And it was like a 3-hour freedom off the ship, down on solid ground again, you know. And it was nice. Then we had to get aboard ship and take a look. So we were back out in the Atlantic in a couple of days before they announced that this ship was headed for P-92, New York City. Wow. I almost jumped overboard. I was so happy, you know. And what was nice as we were coming in to the harbor of New York, of course the Verrazano Bridge wasn't built yet, but where the Belt Parkway would wind around the shoreline there, as we were approaching it, 2 fireboats came out and shooting sprays of red water and blue water up in the air as the ship came sailing through, you know. And all along the shoreline there were people holding bed sheets, welcome home boys, waving flags, you know. I mean, it was really very nice, you know. So, and we pulled into Pier 92, and anyone who was lived from the Mississippi east, they took those guys off, like they split the country from the Mississippi to the east to New York in half. Anyone that was in the western part of it got off the ship first and went over to another dock, and they were going to put them aboard something or trains and move them out. We had to stay on the ship another extra night, the people who lived from that point to to New York City. So we stayed aboard the Wakefield for one more night. Next day they brought huge, big Army tugboats over to beside the ship. We climbed down the gangplank, and we were taken then around to the Brooklyn Armed Guard Center, which is the Bush Terminal in Brooklyn along the Belt Parkway there. And we were put up there for about, I think, 4 days. And from there we were bused individually, groups of us, out to the Lido Beach Hotel, which was a Navy discharge center. So I got discharged from the Lido Beach Hotel out on Long Island. My parents lived in Franklin Square at the time, no, Richmond Hill. And my father met me at the Bush Terminal, and he followed the bus out to the Lido Beach Hotel. And after I was discharged, it took like a couple of hours to go through the whole discharge process. Then he met me and my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. They met me there, and I got on in the car and drove home. That was it. I was finished.
I'm going to go back a second. You were in Guam for 5 months after the war. What did you do during that time?
Well, basically what we were doing is keeping an eye on the stuff that was there, because a lot of it was being filtered and being stolen by the natives.
Oh, okay.
We had tons and tons of sheets of plywood, and their huts were all falling apart. So we were more or less on guard duty, and we were just having a lot of free time, which we didn't have the first part of the time there, you know. So we still had to work our hour shifts, though. We still had to work nights and work days. But they ended up, believe it or not, giving this stuff to the Guamanians.
I was just going to say they left everything behind.
Everything was left, and they would come in and get what you want. A lot of the jeeps were being loaded aboard ships, and I don't know what they were doing with them. Probably dumping them at sea or something like that. But I know one of my cousins was also on Guam. He was in the Navy Air Corps as a mechanic at one of the airports. And they had gotten in a whole run of fighter planes that were lined up on one of the runways and never used. They were taken from the carrier that they were sent over on, flown to Guam, you know, lined up and never used. They weren't needed because the war came to an end. So he was ordered with a bunch of his friends to get on the line of these combat planes, and of course they were wooden prop planes, strip the props off them, pack the props up in cosmoline, and put them in wooden crates, and they were shipped back to the States. The planes were dismantled, the engines taken off, loaded on barges, taken out and dumped. And the plane bought the hulks that were just left there. Why they did these kind of things, I have no idea, and he didn't know. And he was like a mechanic, a Navy mechanic. And he says, we're stripping the engines off the planes, taking them out in barges and dumping them. Funny things happen. But there was such a surplus of extra stuff that I guess maybe in some of his brother's mind it made sense to just destroy it all, you know. So anyway, they ended up giving plywood to the Guamanian people like it was going out of style, you know. They were rigging up their homes into plywood shacks and whatnot, which probably all buckled on them as soon as it got damp and raining enough. Because most of it was interior stuff rather than exterior plywood. And there were cement bags by the thousands left there. We had one time 3 or 4 Liberty ships came in, loaded down with bags of cement. And they were unloaded, stacked up. Oil drums were taken off the ships, stacked up, just left. God ever knows what happened to them. We couldn't wait to take off and get home. Whatever happened to all this equipment, who knows?
After you were discharged, did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
I certainly did. I went to Prime Institute. I went there for 3 years at night. And I also had my drafting, my kit of tools that I needed for the course at Pratt. Drafting set and things like that. I took a course in air conditioning design that helped me in the future, because when I was working with the tools, I started picking up ways of measuring in the field, and one time I became a draftsman drawing ductwork up, you know. It changed my life, the GI Bill.
Did you ever make use of the 5220 Club?
Not really, no, I never did. But what the dumb thing I did was to cut my $10,000 insurance policy down to $5,000. What a mistake that was. In those days, $10,000 was a lot of money. I said, what do I have to keep paying on the $10,000 policy? So I cut it in half. That premium, the $5,000, keeps mounting and building and building. Imagine what it would have been if it had left the $10,000, you know? Oh well.
Did you join any veterans
I
organizations?
never did. I never did. My brother was into the American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars and all of it. No, I never did.
Now, I know you already alluded to this. You did keep in contact with guys that you served with.
Oh yeah, we used to write Christmas cards and one of those.
Did you ever have any reunions or anything like that?
No, not really, no. No, we never got together. One that just died, he lived in Pittsburgh, and my wife and I were married at the time, and he got married sort of later in life. We drove out to his wedding and spent 2 or 3 days with he and his, well, not his wife, but I mean, with his family before the wedding. And of course, when they got married, they left on their honeymoon, and we came home. And then he traveled east one time. He was going someplace on business, and he stopped at our house and spent 2 or 3 nights with us. So we took him into the city and showed him New York City. He had never been in there before. And then we continued, you know, writing to one another and whatnot. You know. But the other fellows, I just sort of broke time, you know, broke with them. I write to them on Christmas time, just a card, but that was it. But Paul, this fellow Paul and I, well, we were close in where our names were on the ballot, you know, the list. So we were always usually on the same work detail or the same anything, whatever it was. The 2 names were so close that we would be working together. So we became very good friends, you know, because of that. And, but he was the only one I really kept up a relationship with.
Now, you also mentioned this a little bit. How do you think your time in the service changed or had an effect on your life?
I suppose it probably had a change in my life that I wasn't even aware of at the time. You know, I'm glad I did it. I wouldn't have. I think I would have felt really bad had I not experienced being in the service, because it is an experience. I mean, you do things and you hear things and you learn things that you probably would never hear it before. You know, but you got to take the good with the bad and the bad with the good.
Well, you did say it gave you the opportunity to go to college.
It did. I went to Prime Institute in Brooklyn for 3 years at night while I was working, you know, with the tools and sheet metal. And it helped me a lot. It did. Because I was in the business 45 years, and I spent 20 of them, the last 20, as a draftsman on the board, going out and taking field measurements and laying out ductwork and stuff like that. That was a big help right there.
Okay. Well, thank you very, very much for the interview.
That sounds good.